We're coming. All right. Yay!
Hello, hello, and welcome back to yet another episode of Dark Shad-Bros. First of all, let me take the time to thank each and every one of you who tunes in for each and every episode. We truly appreciate your love and support. And this is what episode is this, John?
19.
Episode 19. So we're slowly getting up there. We just did a wonderful 3-show panel all about the NBC 1991 Dark Shadows remake. If you haven't seen it, please tune in and check that out, as well as our previous episodes. That was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun discussing all of that. Now, before we go any further, for those of you who don't know me, and there's absolutely no reason in this whole wide world why you should, my name is Peter Mack. I work primarily in musical theater and in cabaret. Did a handful of off-Broadway shows and tours. Now I work primarily in the cabaret field, paying tribute generally to the late, great Judy Garland, also known as the world's greatest entertainer. And that's my story. I also used to write for the Huffington Post, wrote a book about the Salem witch trials as it pertains to the moving image. And that's enough about me for the moment. I am going to move along to our other guest host, Mr. Michael Panzerato.
Hello, hello. I am he, none other. I am also an actor. Lesser note, I do Jonathan Harris. I send up a lot of love to him on all of the various Lost in Space fan pages and such. So if you're looking, go to a convention or look there for me. You can also see I just made a movie with my son called The Dabbler, available on YouTube on Studio Synonym. Also, my son made a music video you can see there. So please check it out and hit like. But that's me. Lots going on these beautiful days. Loving this time to talk about Dark Shadows. It literally is the highlight of my week. So over to the absolute brains behind this, Dr. G, DJ Schaefer.
Hey. Thank you. First of all, The Dabbler is brilliant. I thought it was so well shot.
Oh.
I thought you were great. So everyone should check that out. And I am Peter Mack's husband, and I also am a tribute artist. I've been a fan of Dark Shadows since Peter and I have been together, which will be 22 years in exactly 10 days from today. And so we've had an opportunity to work with a lot of the actors from the show, including one of the stars of the movie we're going to talk about tonight, Nancy Barrett. We did a show with her for several weeks called Judy and B and Nancy Makes Three. From time to time during this broadcast, I will appear to not be looking at the camera. I may appear to be looking away or down on my phone. That's because I am checking for your comments and questions. So if you have any comments or questions, please submit them. You can private message me and or on any one of the places where this is streaming. I'll be checking throughout the show, and I can put your questions and comments on screen. So that's it. Thank you. Back to my husband.
Well, and with any of the previous episodes, guys, if you watch those, if you haven't and you're catching up, always leave a comment or a question there. Sometimes we're a little slow to get to them, but we do like to go on and respond to all of the comments and questions. Also want to give a shout out to the House of Dark Shadows page that has wonderful viewing parties. I think they're about to wrap the show up. But they've been showing episodes from the last leg of the show. I think they're in the Catherine Bromwell story, 1841 Parallel Time right now. And just recently they took a poll as to where they wanted the fans to start out again. And I led the march. I believe I led the march. The beginning, the first year, you got to go there. It was between episode 210, when old Barney Boo comes out of the box.
Barney Boo.
Or going, and I'm like, please go to episode 1, because that those first 11 months, 10 months, they get a bad rap. So I'm hoping House of Dark Shadows that you will hear us and go back to the beginning where, it all started with a girl named Victoria Winters.
So, and thank you, Hods, for sharing our show this evening in your group. That was amazing.
Also, be sure to check out the other Dark Shadows podcasts. We are but one of many. There is Penny Dreadful, Tara at Collinwood. She has had amazing podcasts. I mean, since the get-go, but recently, the man who built Collinwood, the gentleman who actually built his house to look like Seaview Terrace and Lyndhurst combined. David Hennessy has been on there. She's had wonderful panels with the stars. Just all the way, and there's so many. I mean, Collinsport After Dark, Between the Shadows, Jules Staines, resident of Collinwood. Check them all out. They're all worth checking out. So we want to support because a rising tide floats all boats, as a wise woman once said. Also, please like and subscribe if you have not done so yet. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps us with viewership a lot. Please like and subscribe, and leave your comments and questions there. So, just what's going on? We need to wish a happy birthday to Ezra Braithwaite. It would have been Abe Vigoda's, I believe, 105th birthday tomorrow. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He would have been 100. Either 104 or 105 tomorrow.
104.
104. So happy birthday, Ezra Braithwaite. I did get to see him at, I think, 2 of the conventions. One was at the Marriott Marquis. I think it was 1993 or 1995. And by that point, he had been pronounced dead at least 10 times and read his own obituaries and was joking about it. I think he had a collection. He had a scrapbook of his obituaries, how many times people had said he had passed away.
That's hysterical.
He was a lot of fun and was a good sport considering that he did, 1897? And I think he came back. Does he come back in 1897 or later on in the show? He plays another character.
I think he comes back later on in the series, doesn't he?
Later in the series. I know
he's killed by Quentin.
He's killed by Quentin.
I remember that.
Right. But it's not just Ezra. I'm trying to remember, is it Ezra's father in the past, or is it in 1840? I forget. But I know that he's on the show again. I know he is. I would bet my last brown butter chocolate chip cookie on it.
Oh, Otis Green. He plays Otis Green and Ezra Braithwaite in the original Dark Shadows, but it doesn't say on what I'm looking at very quickly. It doesn't say in Dark Shadows Wiki. But yeah, Otis Green, whoever that was, I don't remember him.
Is it? I don't know if it's parallel to, maybe it's 1970 parallel time. He comes in there. I remember. I was like, oh my God, I forgot Abe is in it again.
He looked about 105 when he played Ezra. I almost said Isaiah because of the revival too.
That's right, Isaiah Braithwaite. And a very happy belated birthday to the late great Keith Prentice, who plays Morgan Collins in 1841 Parallel Time, Bromwell's nemesis. And he does not get, I think, the credit that he should. He actually was a really good addition to the cast, and I kind of felt bad for Keith because I think he was being directed 2 different ways and didn't quite know where to go with the character. Because there are times you genuinely feel sorry for him, and then times that he's a little bit like early Quentin. He's a genuine douchebag, to use a terminology. He also goes into that house on Haunted Hill laugh. That you know, as they're winding up the story and he's going to wreak his revenge on Catherine and Bromwell, he goes into that house on Haunted Hill laugh that you hear as the door is closing at the end of the movie. That horror, that typical old horror movie laugh.
He had other gifts, I understand. I mean, I don't know them personally, but I heard that he had other.
He did have other gifts.
Tremendous gifts, you know.
You know, they like to put them in those gabardine pants.
Oh,
and
Lord
I just remember watching with John, and John's like saying, whoa. I'm like, isn't that nice? He brought his dachshund to work with him.
Somebody's not Jewish. There we go.
You could tell his religion. That is true. Right. And you got to see him in The Boys in the Band, Brilliant. Which several of the Dark Shadows actors were part of the theatrical. Not just Keith. I think Joel Crothers did it at one point, and Don Briscoe was a replacement. And
speaking of happy belated birthday, we're friends on Facebook. Larry Luckenbill. It just was his 90th birthday.
Larry Luckenbill, that's right. He plays Keith's lover in The Boys in the Band. Yep.
Star Trek.
Yep.
Cybok. Yeah.
Yep.
Spock's brother.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
And Lucille Jr.'s husband.
Exactly right.
I remember Lucy Arnaz saying, well, Star Trek is not a real thing. And he's like, Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
How dare you?
You know, which of course her mother produced. We wouldn't have Star Trek without, you know, she kept it on the air. So thank you, Miss Ball.
That's right. She greenlit it. That's right.
Yep.
She's the
Yep.
first lady of Star Trek.
This is
Absolutely.
true. This is true. And there was something else. There was something else Dark Shadows related. And I've been going on a night and watching Dark Shadows Fans Unite, which we also call the Cliff Notes or the Widow's Hill Notes versions of Dark Shadows. And I always go back to 1967. I either go back to that first Barnabas Julia stuff when they're, you know, the Cure and the love triangle with Vicky. And then I've also been watching when Cassandra shows up on the scene, because that's some really her entrance. Cassandra's entrance is really, really good.
They used that popping music. Bum, 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 bum. Wasn't it what they used over?
Or
That
those
was
great isolated bongs when he's like, I want you to meet my wife, and they go from person to person, bong,
yeah.
bong.
I remember being a kid and thinking that was amazing. That was wild, you know, the wig and all.
Yeah. And she said, we tried every hair color imaginable, and black was the only one that either made me look different and that was flattering to me. They tried redhead, they tried medium brown, they tried every style of it. That was the only wig that kind of gave her a slightly different appearance. You can't hide those eyes.
Carmen Cruz wants us to know that Otis was the grandson of the executioner of Judah.
Thank you, Carmen. Thank you.
And then we have some fans watching. So Carrie Perwicka. Hello, Carrie. We're sorry about the loss of your friend. We'll send this up to him. His name was James. She just lost a very close friend.
Sorry about your friend, honey. Sorry about that.
Gary Swafford says, could you guys do an interview with Nancy Barrett soon? I sometimes think that Nancy is underappreciated, and she was superb on the show, and she was there from beginning to end. We, all three of us, we cannot agree with you more. She is, if not the best actress on the show, certainly one of the best actresses on the show. She's really brilliant.
Yeah, Nancy got to show. She really got to. Well, we got to work with her. Lucky, we were very lucky. We got to. Craig Hamrick, if you know him, Gary, he wrote Barnabas and Company, and he also wrote Big Lou. Co-wrote with Louis Edmonds his autobiography.
He was a very, very close friend of ours.
And he got us in with Nancy. He was like, I want Nancy to be in your show. My tribute to Judy Garland, have Nancy as a guest star. And she wound up doing the show for 8 weeks. She was a doll. Her deceased husband, not so much. Everybody loved Nancy. I can say he's gone now. He was a bit much. Stuart was a bit much to take. But Nancy was a doll and an absolute sweetheart to work with. And we definitely are going to do a Carolyn Stoddard episode. And I would love for Nancy to join us because we had a great time.
I actually just came across her email address. So let's look at that as a sign.
Yes, we will definitely be doing a Carolyn, Nancy Barrett salute. No fear on that.
And we have a new fan, Bob Pierce. Hello, Bob. I've never seen the pre-Barnabas episodes. I started watching in the 4th grade in April of 1967, the month before I was 10. I'm 7 months younger than David Hennessy. So welcome, Bob.
Welcome, Bob, and check those out. Trust me. I mean, it gets spooky very quickly. The vibe, I think, Michael, we've talked about this. The vibe is always there. You know there's something wrong in this house. So it's bubbling below the surface, and then it's about 50 episodes in, I think. 60
Collinwood
episodes.
is very much a character.
Yes. Well,
great house. Both houses.
Everyone forgets there's one episode where Vicky, is with the sobbing, and then no one's in the room, and even David is nowhere to be seen, and you just see the foyer, and you see the door slowly open, and there's no shadow. There's no shadow of anyone, and I think they end the episode on that note, which is like, is it or isn't it? So it's always kind of floating around.
Well, even in the beginning, when Victoria shows up and she says to Elizabeth something about the size of the house or the grandeur of the house or whatever, and Elizabeth says, we don't use most of the rooms. They're closed off and it gets rather cold. That right there to me is like, ugh.
Rather.
That's a bit creepy, isn't it? Yeah, it's a bit creepy, isn't it?
A bit creepy, isn't it?
But we will now move along to the subject of the night. Now, I'm going to be honest here. This is something that we have a long list of topics we want to cover throughout our, hopefully we've got years to come. We'll never stop talking about DS. We did cover House of Dark Shadows last year, which I love on its own. I think Michael and I know John is not a fan of House of Dark Shadows at all. He doesn't like the gratuitous violence, and I understand that. It kind of robs Dark Shadows of the innocence it had on the series. But it's a very slick, fast-paced, one-shot vampire film.
I agree with you. You have to separate it completely and take it for what it is. It is not the Dark Shadows you grew up with. You're not in Kansas anymore, baby. It's totally different. But on its own, standalone, that's not a bad vampire flick.
Parallel, right? I said to you, you got to look at it as a parallel, yet another parallel time. This is another parallel time. Penny Dreadful has said we have to imagine this is where if Sarah didn't come into the picture, what would have happened on the series.
Right.
You know, she takes it as without Sarah coming into it and helping out. So I go along with that theory as well. That's a really good theory.
Yeah.
Now, Night of Dark Shadows, otherwise known as Nods, and we'll go into that later, is another parallel universe. I have to start out by saying I've never been a fan of the movie. I couldn't wait to see it. TBS aired it after my first Dark Shadows festival in 1990. I think it was about 4 weeks later. So that would have been in September. They aired House and Night back to back. And I just remember watching it and I kept falling asleep. I watched the film again last night so we could brush up for this. For probably the 8th or 9th time, and I can honestly tell you, I always go in wanting to like it, especially because I know more of the history now, and yet I just can't do it. I'm like, great cast, although there is one very noticeable absence. Gee, I wonder who that is. And I just have a hard time liking it. I want to. The movie was hacked away out. We're going to get into that. It was not the movie that Dan Curtis had made or that Sam Hall had written. Jim Aubrey. There is a word for Jim Aubrey. I will not say it because we're supposed to be a family-friendly group. Think see you next Tuesday. But we can blame... It was his fault that the movie was cut. Curtis, as in Dan, and Sam Hall and Robert Colbert flew with their edited version, which was rather long, to Los Angeles. They showed it to Jim Aubrey, and he did not like it at all, and basically said, you're cutting 40 minutes of this, and you have 1 day to do it. And he did not like Grayson at all. He was not a fan of Grayson's, and he really wanted Grayson out of the movie. Darren Gross is the head honcho on this. He was the one who discovered the full missing cut. I remember being at, what convention was that? Because this is over 20 years ago now. And that was the banquet. At the banquet, they would try to make a great surprise announcement at the end, and they would tell you where the next festival was going to be and if they had any new news about the series at all. And Jim Pearson said, it will make all of you very happy to know, I'm paraphrasing here, that the full print of Night of Dark Shadows has been discovered and efforts will be made to restore it to its rightful glory. That's a long time ago.
I was there, so it's somewhere in the last 20-ish years.
Yeah. But I remember people were gasping and falling off of their chairs, and I was like, I knew it. The movie was made in 1971. You're not talking about something that was made in 1935. I knew that this film or these scenes had to be sitting in a vault somewhere, and Darren knew where to look. He knew it was Dr. Ballard who found the wreck of the Titanic. He knew exactly where to look to find it.
What's interesting about that plane flight, to show it to the executives, is that the film had not a final edit, and the way that it was delivered was there was a canister of film, and then there was a canister that had the soundtrack. So they had to play at the same time when they were actually showing it. It's an important piece to note, and we'll get back around to why that's important.
And again, as I said, this is Darren Gross's
Baby.
baby, along with Ansel Faraj, who has made many movies that the Dark Shadows stars, several of the stars have co-starred in, starred in over the years, including Lara Parker, Catherine Lee Scott, Jim Storm, Chris Pennock, David Selby. So this is something they've now been working on together in terms of getting it restored. And I'll be curious if it ever comes to fruition. And I know everybody, even though I'm not a fan of the movie, I have friends that I know want it. So I want to see it happen just for them. And it's a piece of movie history. It should be restored. I'll be curious to see if I could see that full cut, if my viewpoint of the movie would change. After John watched the movie last night, he's not convinced that it would change his mind. Am I right or wrong on that?
Not only are you right, I thought it would be akin to torture to have extension of this film. So I apologize.
For those of you who love it.
But I will tell you that I will give this one piece credit. I thought it was well shot. I think Lyndhurst is a character. Collinwood is a character in the film, and I really thought it was beautifully shot. Interestingly enough, Dan has a history of shooting everything from the ground up. This film actually used a lot of the reverse of that, where it was shot from the top down. So just as a quick aside, it was
he liked those floor shots that are kind of ominous. They're very ominous, but people would joke you have to have your nose hairs trimmed if you're going to be in a Dan Curtis movie because of all the low angles. Because it does make it very spooky. And then of course they use that kind of creepy peepee where even from the start of the film, someone is obviously watching Tracy and Quentin, and we don't know. Is it Carlotta? Is it Angelique? And he did that in NBC Dark Shadows as well when Vicky arrives. You're not quite sure who's watching from the top of the staircase, but he used that same creepy peepee style, that over-the-shoulder camera that makes it look like somebody else is watching.
Mm-hmm. It gave me, there's one scene in particular that when they go through the car chase with the bongo music, and then and they're walking back. They're like, what is that? They're walking back to Collinwood, and he says, we have to get rid of Carlotta. Somebody's watching them in the window, and my first thought was, oh, it's Angelique, her ghost. And then I thought, well, no, maybe it's Carlotta. So you do get that kind of who's observing the whole thing, or is it poor dear Gerard who took one too many hits to the head?
And Jim Storm is great. I mean, it's totally devoid of what he was playing on the series. It's totally devoid of what he was playing on the series in terms of that Gerard Stiles. There's even a little hint of Willie Loomis. His accent is very much like Johnny Carlin's Willie Loomis. Again, like he was from another part of the country, maybe down south somewhere. It's interesting to me.
The acting is superb. Like you can never say. I mean, these actors put their all of them put their all into it. Like you said, Gerard alone, you went from a guy who was manipulating the entire family and Barnabas and Julia to a guy who eats with a fork and a cork on it. It's incredible the difference in the characters. And I love to watch them act in this movie, but it is really. It doesn't feel like Dark Shadows to me, other than the old house. It's an old house with wealthy people and portraits everywhere. It just feels like a witch movie, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it does feel like just a witch's movie. Yeah.
Well, let me say this. I've always said, if you change the names, if you took out Quentin, Angelique, Gerard Stiles, Collinwood, it could be any, it could be anybody, anywhere, anytime, anything. I mean, again, parallel universe, because, when she says to them, Joshua Collins built Collinwood in the 1600s, I'm doing the math. I'm like, Okay, so in 1797, he would have been, I'm trying to go backwards. He would have been 107 at the time that
I did the same thing. I was like, Christ, Joshua is virile. He was a virile dude, man. I agree. I thought the same thing. I'm like, now they're throwing in Dark Shadows names to keep it Dark Shadows, just arbitrarily putting names here and there. Stoddard, Mrs. Stoddard, and even at some point, I was like, I was trying to imagine, okay, are they gonna, the first time when I saw it for the first time, I remember I was little because I think our experience with the series was sort of similar. It had just been brought back on rerun, and you didn't know, you had parents that liked it or maybe didn't, I didn't know that it was it was not a sequel, that it was divorced from
yeah,
the other movie. So I kept thinking, okay, well, they killed Barnabas off, but they're good. It was on TNT or TBS or something back to back. Oh well, he'll show up. They're going to bring him back. Okay, this is a sequel, and now it's going to be like Angelique in 1795, or maybe they'll have another character we didn't haven't had a chance to see yet. And when it was not that way at all, a 10-year-old, not much. There's not much going on to occupy a 10-year-old's mind in that movie.
it's very artsy. It's very
Yeah.
artsy. There's not as much dialogue. I'm big on dialogue. I love dialogue. And I said Laura Lamar was a dear friend of ours. We always called her our West Coast mom. And when I brought it up to her, I said, they call it nods for a reason because it works better than Ambien. And she laughed. I mean, she had absolutely no, what's the word? Ego about it. She had
No.
no ego about it.
And how sexy is she in this movie? Madame.
But I'm
All
like,
the
but all
hair
you
and
did,
all.
but she looks menacing. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
raise the diaphanous gown and menace someone or, be sensual,
Yep.
which she does very well, and lure them into your web. But that's it. One of the best characters on the show, and she has hardly any dialogue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's 5 lines.
I mean, even with the cut stuff, which is a very pivotal seance scene, which Nancy Barrett said she was upset that had been cut. Although, when we were doing the cabaret show with Nancy, and I said, well, I'm going to make a joke about Night of Dark Shadows when we do our little T for Two segment. And I said, I want to be fair because I know you hacking the movie up made it incoherent. Her exact words, I will take a lie detector test, was, Peter, before they cut it, it was an incoherent movie. She said, I went to Dan and said, this makes now these were her words. I've got to go back. I have not, the shooting script is in the Dark Shadows movie book. If you don't have it, get it. There's wonderful pieces by Kate Jackson and Nancy and Laura, and Darren Gross goes into great detail. But she said, I went to Dan and said, Dan, this makes no sense. The witch is menacing my husband while I'm shampooing my hair. What is this? So
It feels like a seven. Like if they had, to me, they should have just made it another, maybe even another portion of the Collins family,
Yeah.
like the sequel series, and not used Angelique as Angelique, maybe some just a witch that menaced the family, because there are some spooky scenes in the film, like the like you said about the watching, and it is absolutely beautifully shot. There's a scene where there's a coat. I think Kate Jackson or somebody or Quentin lays his coat across a chair, and I was watching it thinking, God, that was beautifully shot, but it just leaves you empty when you're looking to watch Dark Shadows, and that was a fear of mine with the sequel series. Is this going to be so divorced from the original that we're going to feel like it's not Dark Shadows? And you know what I mean? Like that, watching this today, that's what I was thinking about. Huh,
yeah,
interesting.
Nick
So,
Nick Nick Caputo just weighed in, who is an honorary Dark Shad-Bro. He did our Burke Devlin panel with us, and he was saying, it's
I just put it
beautifully
up.
shot. It leaves him cold, and it's true. You just, it's hard to. And I love Nancy, and I love all of them. I mean, I'm a huge Grayson
right.
Hall fan. I think Nancy and Kate is very likable. She's it's just that there's and I don't know if the pressure was on Sam Hall. We got to go backwards a little bit, guys, to point out that Jonathan was supposed to be in the sequel. And this is what led to, please watch Penny Dreadful's Why Did Dark Shadows Really End? They
Yeah.
did the movie. Jonathan was not happy with the way it came out. He didn't know it was going to be that violent. He didn't like that Barnabas. And he was summoned to Dan Curtis's office. And this was to discuss the new next movie, and which is a mystery to us. Hold that thought for a minute. But he said, I'm not doing another movie. I don't want to do it. I don't want to play that Barnabas. He didn't say I don't want to play Barnabas anymore.
Right.
I don't want to play that Barnabas. It's one note. He's really evil. That's not what I've created. And so Dan had a little, hissy fit and said, great, then you never have to play Barnabas again, and fired him. And Jonathan was really walked out of the office, according to Mary O'Leary, his business partner, said he was taken aback going, I didn't mean to get myself fired. And I still want to do the series, but I don't want to do that kind of movie again.
Right.
We don't know. It could be in a storage unit, according to R.J. Jameson, who wrote Grayson's biography, Hard Act to Follow. I think there are 1 or 2 storage units that belong to the Hall family out on Long Island. There was a gentleman named Robert Finocchio who ran one of Grayson's fan clubs. Mm-hmm. And in an interview in either 72 or 73, allegedly, she said, Night of Dark Shadows, Curse of Dark Shadows, as it was called originally, was supposed to be the 1795 storyline.
An origin story, right?
About how Barnabas became a vampire. And you go, oh my God, that would have been amazing. And we can only guess. We can only guess who would have been in it. I wonder, would it have been all set in the past? Because we know that Dan loved being in the past entirely. Would there have been a parlor game of a seance, and perhaps the governess, Daphne, would have been sent back? And she, like in the series, she would have been on trial? I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot, how they would have played out that storyline.
Mm-hmm.
And how you would have wheedled it down to a 98-minute film.
That would have been tough.
It would have looked beautiful. I think it would have looked beautiful. Lara would have had a bigger part. Catherine, I asked her several years ago at Lyndhurst, I said, if he had called you back to do the other movie, would you have done it? She said, in hindsight, yes. If he had wanted me to play Josette, I would have probably more than likely said yes and come back to do that. Otherwise, maybe Kate would have been Josette. I'm assuming that maybe...
Because these weren't big commitments. It was a 6-week shoot.
Well, because you have to realize that Penny has been quick to point this out. Who would have kept the show afloat?
Right.
If Jonathan had been fired, if they had gone through that, and we don't know what ABC really knew about Jonathan's. They knew, but it's complicated. It's very complicated. And they didn't want to cancel Dark Shadows. They actually wanted to cancel One Life to Live. They were willing to get rid of One Life to Live to keep Dark Shadows on the air. So a lot of this was Dan Curtis's doing. And could they have sat down and mapped out, talked like adults and said, all right, guys, you're both hardheads. Curtis a little more hardheaded than Fred. Could they have worked out their differences and said, look, it's going to be a romantic story. It's going to be the Josette Angelique storyline. Yes, you're going to have to bite some people. There's going to be a bat attacking you, but it could have been a very romantic horror film.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, I understand the point you're trying to make. I don't disagree with you.
But we don't know this for sure, and I keep wondering, because Darren Gross said he's never been able to find Sam's notes, because Craig Hamrick even alludes that there was a script, or maybe it was a synopsis that Jonathan was shown. And he just said, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing another movie.
Bob Pierce asks what the impetus was for the executives asking for the cut in time. His question was was this supposed to be a double feature, Hods and Nods? That no.
No.
The reason they asked for it to be shortened was so that they could get extra showings at the theaters where it was contracted. So if they could get it below the 2-hour mark, as close to an hour and a half as possible, they could get 2 or 3 extra showings in a day.
It was almost what they did with a very different movie, and they are on different levels, but it's what they did with A Star is Born.
Sure.
Which is why they're, and Warner Brothers knows that there is a full print of that sitting in somebody's basement in California, and they could restore it if they wanted to. The guy tried to make them a deal. The guy, they refused to comply. Apparently, again, allegedly, this is what happened in the last 10, 12 years or so, I think, that allegedly they went to the guy, and the guy said, I'll give it to you if you give me this, and you give me this. And they said, no, allegedly. And I'm like, give the man whatever he wants so A Star is Born can be restored.
It was, and he wanted, it was money and credit.
Money he wanted, allegedly, he wanted a certain amount of money and a credit. I'm like, give the man whatever he wants so we get the film restored. And I know that's how fans of Night of Dark Shadows feel, and they have it. I mean, it's just a question of Darren was quick to point out that he works for MGM.
Exactly.
But Warner Brothers bought that catalog of MGM films. So they own everything pre-1986, and the 2 Dark Shadows movies fall into that. So they have to be the ones to say, we're given the green light, let's do this, in terms of restoration.
And even though Darren found the footage, he's in a precarious place. He talks about this openly, in that he can't be the advocate because he works for MGM to get this project greenlit. That's where Ansel picked up the torch to try to move the project forward.
Yes, and Darren said, there were other things I found that were missing. He's like, it was kind of good at the time, when I first found
that's a good point.
That, oh my God, we can restore it. And then they got put on a shelf, and then he found other stuff, missing dialogue. I think there was another moment.
Originally, it was just silent footage he found. But then he found 3 scenes that actually had the dialogue already there. And in the looping directions that he was pulling together, he actually realized that they were off with a couple of the lines, which he actually found the correct sound.
I noticed, even in watching the movie last night, there's a scene with David Selby where I think David's voice is totally off. And a lot of these off things have to do with the dramatic cuts that were made. I'm like, John, the music. Did you just notice the music?
Yeah, I said that to you too once.
And I forgot. Darren pointed that out. It's because of these abrupt cuts. You hear 2 notes of music, and then all of a sudden it's gone.
Right.
You're like, whoa, what just happened to the music cue there?
Do they ever explain? I know they explain Carlotta's odd position in time and reincarnation and all of that, but do they ever explain Gerard?
It's a great question.
Is he just some sort of a recruit? Obviously question. He knows what's going on. He's just a dimwit that they hired, or I was trying to think of that today. I was like, so where's this guy coming into the picture? He's obviously in on the project.
Well, and he says,
I thought he was Carlotta's nephew.
Oh, okay. Maybe I missed that because I was like, what is happening with this? Where did you get this guy?
I thought he was Carlotta's nephew.
But even if he is the nephew, he has that. He says to her, basically, and I'm paraphrasing here, I thought I was enough. Now that he's here, where do I fit in? Exactly. I was like, where does that come from?
That is exactly when I started to think, who the hell is this guy? What do you mean?
Then we actually stopped the movie because John's like, wait a minute.
I did.
What did I just miss here? And I'm like, I have a feeling Angelique's ghost has been carrying on with him.
Excuse me.
Okay, because I was like, is there a relational issue, or is she trying to bring Quentin's is he a host body for the spirit of Charles, or something strange is like that. The whole situation was like, I see Angelique has lowered her standards.
Catch as catch can.
It was like,
Bob,
oh, indeed.
It's the 1954 Judy Garland: A Star Is Born.
He was asking which Star is Born it
Yeah,
was, right?
that's the one that was butchered by. I was listening to Judy in an interview from 1967 when she was getting ready to write her autobiography again, and they said, "Who was it who was it that cut Star Is Born?" It wasn't Jack Warner, and she said, "No, it was Harry Warner, also known as Harry Horseshit."
Bob Bob Pierce brings up the point that really the only connection to Dark Shadows was the names. But the interesting point is it's jarring with these other names that are just picked out of the air. I was talking to Michael before the show tonight. The one that really jumps out to me is Reverend Strack, where they just inverted the Trask name. And I was like, oh, that's a strange choice.
Now, let me first of all, a couple of important points there. Yes, you did bring that up. So, one, Night of Dark Shadows, they doubled the budget. They had a $900,000 budget. The mausoleum in the cemetery, they built it. They didn't go to Sleepy Hollow Cemetery like they did the first time. And
So
I noticed
that's on the Lyndhurst
it was
property.
on the Lyndhurst property. I wish they had kept it there. I noticed that the mausoleum door is a little more akin to the one on the television show, even
The
though
series,
it's not. Yeah. So I kind of liked that. And then scenes that are missing, or the interiors of the bowels were 50 feet. Was it 50 feet below the?
50 feet below the house. Good Lord,
That's
it's a bomb shelter from hell. uh.
Those are the stables, part of the stables that are no longer there. If you go to Lyndhurst where those stables were, now there's a tent. The stables are still there, but that piece of the stables are no longer there. That's where you usually go to a Dark Shadows event. Part of it will be where those kind of rickety wooden stables are. On the other side is Matthew Morgan's cottage from the television series. That's where you see the door, which Cy replicated, that very, very distinct green door with those, what do they call those panes of glass?
Yeah. Oh God, we live in Salem, Massachusetts.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
should know that lead.
Yeah,
The
those
lead
very,
panel.
those,
Those single pane lead, hand poured.
So that's right off to the side over there. But now that's a tent full time where they have events, and they use the whole, everything's been restored. Everything's been restored except, and I don't know why maybe it was beyond saving.
And for those of you who are watching, it has been released. The Dark Shad-Bros will be hosting a tour in July for 2 days. We're doing 4 different tours on the Lyndhurst property. We are the tour guides for the walk around Lyndhurst. Saturday is sold out, but there are a couple of tickets left for the tours on Sunday.
It's July 19th and 20th. And
this is Catherine Lee Scott's event.
Catherine has put this together. Marie Wallace is going to be there. Sharon Smith Lentz, Sarah Collins. She's going to be there. And I don't know, there might be other surprise guests. But we're doing the walking tours, 12:30 and 3:30, 12:30 and 3:30. And then there's champagne and cocktails on the veranda of Collinwood. So there's going to be some fun stuff going on there. So we were delighted. We've been going back and forth with Lyndhurst, John and myself, for a while now. So we were delighted when they invited us to be the walking tour guide. So
come and meet us.
I think it's going to be a good $1 worth of fun there.
Or $5, as it were. Right.
So join us. Join the Dark Shad-Bros for the walking tour.
We'll be
Can
covering.
I just say?
Please.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you.
No, you first.
I was going to say something about the cast. Can we just take a minute to acknowledge? First of all, back to the names. You go from a series that has names like Barnabas, Jeremiah, Angelique Josette, Gerard Stiles, Nicholas Blair, to names like, what were their names? Tracy.
Tracy.
Charles. Chuck. It's like, where would that's what the first thing that makes you feel like it's not Dark Shadows, because you know all these fabulous names. But the look of that cast, I didn't realize till today. I noticed it in the original, looking at Catherine Lee Scott in House of Dark Shadows, how beautiful she was. Because you don't notice it as much in the series, because I guess the camera is so much more, I guess it's such a better camera work, quality of film. But they all are so beautiful. they and contemporary looking, like they could have been taken and put into now and be
Yeah.
just as beautiful. It was wild looking at it. I was like, wow, I never realized how beautiful Kate Jackson, because Kate Jackson tends to be kind of like plain in film and all that kind of thing, and the
Yeah,
lady next door, clean cut. But I was looking at her today, I was like, she is really a beautiful, beautiful
beautiful.
woman. And
Beautiful.
Miss
Beautiful
And
lady.
Miss Parker, Miss Parker, please. But but
right.
it was pretty wild.
So the names, the inverted name, it was supposed to be the Reverend Trask, and Jerry Lacey was supposed to play the part. He became unavailable, so they got Thayer and they made it Reverend Strack. Maybe they thought because it was so tied to Jerry Lacey,
Out of
they had out
reverence.
of
No
reverence.
pun intended.
Um, it was supposed to be Samantha Collins from 1840, Virginia Vestoff. She became unavailable. That's when they changed it to Laura, and Diana Malay took over as the wife.
I have to say, I was glad to
Ah,
see her. I was
me
happy to
too.
see Diane. I wish she had more to do, um, other than giggling at the funeral. But
Right.
she did it beautifully. But yeah, it was really nice to see her. And they must have told Claire not to wash her hair for like a week.
They're
That's all I
Oh,
kept
like,
thinking was,
right.
ooh.
she slept. Actually, Diana slept in Lyndhurst. There's one beautiful room that I don't think we get to really see in any of the movies. She spent the night and said she had a little visitor. Not sure who it was, but
Oh,
she
wow.
she said yes, the house is haunted. Diana maintained that the mansion was, and that it wasn't a malevolent spirit, but but that there was someone who paid her a visit one night while she was asleep there.
Oh, no, 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 no. No, no,
um,
no.
there was a joke. There was a joke in one of the comedies that we did. Not mine. It was somebody else's, where they show that scene at the funeral, and she's laughing, and it was something to the effect of, "Now here's what you didn't see. It was the direction she was given right before they rolled the camera. Think of what Night of Dark Shadows will do for your career." And
Oh,
she's
oh,
yeah, she starts,
it's
yeah.
it's true, it's true. All I could think of was the fight that they had in 1897, and I thought, so in a way, Laura's kind of like, you know, yeah, you thought you beat me, but you didn't.
It's so disjointed. I mean, that's the thing. It's like these flashbacks, which are wonderful, but it's so disjointed. It's cool to see Clarice. She couldn't do the first
Yeah.
movie, so there she is as Mrs. Castle with her own flaming red hair that we never got to see on the show.
Hmm.
Um, Everybody wondered why Sharon Lentz wasn't Sarah, even though it was a
She
different
would have been
Sarah.
great.
She was a couple of years older by that point. I don't know if it would have made sense.
I understand what you're saying.
It had been 3-4 years, I think, since she had been on the series, so she might have been too old
Got it.
to do that. And then we get Chris Pennock, who again seemingly is Gerard's past counterpart.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, that's because when he looks at Gerard, he's seeing Gabriel.
Mm.
Oh,
So I think Gerard is Gabriel's reincarnation as well. At least that's how it reads to me.
interesting.
Well, and
This
then that
movie is
makes sense
so
because there's the
confusing.
jealousy again. Oh, it's it's a real mess. Real fakakta.
It's a cactus. Gabados.
Michigas, this Michigas.
Uh, woo! I watched it twice in a row to try and see, first time as a movie in and of itself, and
Yeah.
then the second time as dark. And like I said, as a movie about a witch, it has very creepy moments. The ending is very creepy to me,
Yes.
um, because it just is one of those turns you don't expect. It actually reminded me a little bit of, and I don't know how far in time it was from the other movie that Lara Parker made, Race with the Devil.
Rest for the devil.
As a kid, I was so disturbed by the fact that, because you're a little kid, and this is Angelique being hounded by Saintness, and she doesn't win. In the end, they get her, and I found that so disturbing. And it actually today reminded me a little bit of that. That that Willie and Carolyn get, by Angelique.
And Lara
Although
Parker
they're
would
not
tell
the
you
Carolyn.
the real witch in that movie was Loretta Swit.
Yes. Dun dun
I've heard some stories
dun.
about her. Yeah, and
No,
others with
no love lost. No love lost
mo-
with Loretta Swit.
movies she created problems for that she wasn't even involved with. I heard. So that's what kind of doll baby she is.
Yeah, yeah. I asked her. I said, "You want to talk about Loretta Swit?" And Lamar was famous for this. She'd have a glass of Chardonnay in her hand, and she would just go, "Well."
Oh.
She's.
But
I listened to this audio drama with Laura Parker and John Carlin today as well, to kind of get me in the mood prior to for this movie, and they're both beautiful in this movie. Brilliant, brilliant acting in the movie and in the audio drama. But there's a scene when he really is visited by Angelique while he's that time when he's been shot in place of Barnabas for Maggie
Oh
when
yeah.
Barnabas frames him. So it's that time period where he's in Windcliff and he's being visited by Angelique in his sleep. And he calls her an angel. Then the angel would come to see me. My angel would come. And at one point, she says, "Just what do you think I am?" And he said, "Well, I thought you were an angel." And she does that kind of like that. Not well, but she does like a laugh and she goes, "I'm no angel." It reminds me that no angels here. So it was like really reminiscent of that kind of, well,
I want to find that clip.
and we don't really know like much about this family from the past. It's was Quentin Charles rather was Charles justified with what he was doing? Clearly, Angelique was really in love with him and not with Gabriel. Um,
yeah.
it's kind of hard to put the pieces together when you're doing these. It's not like on the show where you would go back in time and you got to flesh a story like that out.
Right.
Darren points out this was an amalgam of the Haunted Palace and Rebecca and the 1970 parallel time storyline.
I didn't even put together the Haunted Palace, but that's so true.
Yeah.
That is so true. Vincent Price's character is inhabited by an ancestor of his that he looks just like. Ha! Wow. That's not bad.
And
All
I
right.
think probably that they were under the gun. You know, it's a story by Dan Curtis and Sam Hall, script by Sam Hall, and I don't want to throw Sam under the bus, but I think maybe it was with Jonathan's refusal, they were like, crap, we got to get something done here. And
Right.
Dan didn't want a werewolf movie, which I think was his mistake. They should have done the 1897 something of that ilk would have been, I think, much better than what they ultimately went with.
And I just want to say to that point, anybody out there listening with any authority or power, this is why they need to get their asses together, these studios, and greenlight freaking Dark Shadows, either reboot or something, because like all this shit is hot right now.
Amen.
And Dark Shadows is the granddaddy of all of this stuff, whether people realize it or not. Werewolves are all the rage right now, and Quentin would have been a beautiful. That's a great storyline. The
Yeah.
gypsy, although you can't say the Romana folk and all that stuff, it would be lovely to do, and should have
Yeah.
been done like you said. They should have done that. Dan Curtis should have done the Quentin storyline.
Yeah.
Because Angelique, I mean, if you're not going to do her back in Martinique, Angelique's descent storyline, then you really should have done Quentin. you know, made up something about her past in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, Rebecca's a wonderful story, but I mean, even in 1970 parallel time, it does get on your nerves after a while. It's the
Yeah.
only time Catherine is a victim, truly
Yeah.
a victim. That's the only Maggie that's like, you're like, honey, please pull yourself together here.
Well, and they're one tone again, like you said with Barnabas. Angelique is one tone, and she was not one tone on the series.
No, no, no. So I would have much preferred a werewolf movie to, and I think also by killing Barnabas off, and it's about Night of Dark Shadows, and I keep coming back to Jonathan, but you had a franchise, Dan. Almost every single one of those storylines could have been done as a standalone movie. You just had to figure out a way to bring Barnabas back. And again, I've gone with the doppelganger. People can make fun of me. I think there needed to be some kind of device that Barnabas gets staked, but it's not Barnabas. And that's how they could have kept him alive.
I have one name for you. The bloke that played Peter Bradford.
Oh, Roger Davis.
If you are telling me that they shied away from a doppelganger with Barnabas, but introduced a character into 1966 that looked just like Peter Bradford and says, "I'm not Peter Bradford." You don't have enough of a problem with doppelganger to not make that happen in the movie. You obviously you're absolutely right.
And definitely they could have. I mean, again, I would assume that maybe David might have been Jeremiah. They might have just, if they had gone with the Martinique storyline, the 1795. That's my guess, is that they would have brought David Selby in as Jeremiah, or maybe they would have just called him Quentin. For all we know, they might have just decided to call him Quentin. If they wanted David manning the show again, I also think, because he loved him so much, that maybe Mitch Ryan would have been in the second film as Jeremiah.
Oh. And everything you're saying, the fans would have eaten up. The fans wouldn't have given a damn if it was a doppelganger to get Barnabas back into the piece. They would have loved having Burke Devlin back, Rich Ryan, I'm sorry. And anything to do with Selby that was a tie-in to that, they would have eaten up. All these are so plausible. It's sad.
Yeah,
it's sad.
Yeah. Well, that's why you need the fans. It's like you got to bring the fans in, And there's lots of wonderful ideas out there. That was what I love. I love Grayson in the movie. I wanted more of her. Of course, that was Jim Aubrey. He kept cutting, and that's one of the things that hurt Dan. Not Dan. Sam. I think I said this in the preamble, but when they got on the plane after the cuts had been made, he apparently dissolved into tears, and it's not my work I'm crying about. He also is demeaning my wife.
Yeah.
It really hurt Sam's feelings as he kept cutting her out of the film.
An Academy Award nominated actress.
Bingo.
Being cut for an ego thing.
I love Claire and Alex. I love Claire and Alex. They're wonderful characters, but they're Nancy points out, they were underutilized.
And where the hell were they going? I know they were going home. Where the hell was home? He moved. It seemed like they went a great distance to get to Collinwood. David Selby and Kate Jackson, and then Kate and Oz would just jump in the car, or Tracy and Oz just be there. Where the hell did they live? A little bit more info would have been nice.
Right.
Well, and then at the end, they when they're typing out a newspaper clipping, what happened to everybody, they get partway through a line, and then it just cuts to the credits.
It just stops.
Isn't that weird? Yep.
What's the line? What? And then what?
John, right? Yeah. John looked at me. He's like, "What? What?
Who does that?" It was strange, and it was an interesting part of the movie.
A very interesting part of the movie, yeah. And we did see, when Darren was allowed to show stuff. I believe it was in the old swimming pool, which they had filled with water for that scene where he's trying to drown her. But the bigger dream sequence with Lara, and that was all of these very glowy colors, and I believe that these huge sconces that are aflame. They really went all out, and that's one of the things that I believe Darren was allowed to show. I don't think he showed everything, but we did see that. I said, "Oh wow, I don't think we saw the seance scene. I don't, because they were still looping.
I remember the skeleton.
Still looping it. You mean the skeleton? Did he show the skeleton again? It gets jumbled after a while, and he was only allowed to show, I think a minute amount of things to the audiences.
There was a scene of them walking down the staircase, and somebody's playing the organ.
Well, there's when we see in the trailer, when Carlotta goes, "No!" That's from the seance. That's where she's trying to stop the seance. And he's saying to her,
too. Creepy.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I thought the revisions to Quentin's theme were particularly so.
And
I
Cobert,
was
yeah,
thinking
because
about that.
Cobert wanted all new music for House of Dark Shadows, and Dan's thing was no, but the fans love the music.
True.
But I'll bring it back to that. One of the things that pulled me out as a kid, that first time, 12 years old, is when they cut to the you know, to the opening title. And where's the theme? Like
Yeah.
it sucks me, and I love Joanna's theme. That is from the television show. That's Joanna Mills' theme. It's a beautiful piece of music, but I think it's like, where's that? That's what grounds you. That's what sucks you into Dark Shadows.
So the music.
Agreed. Very much so.
So how much of this film was new score versus repurposed score?
It was quite a bit of new score. And again, guys, if you don't have it, you can still get it. I think from Catherine, the Dark Shadows movie book, and you get the shooting scripts for both films. So it's got all of the cutscenes from Night of Dark Shadows in there. You're getting everything in there, which is great. And there's wonderful pictures. I mean, let's see if we can do some.
The hanging scene was creepy. When you see her hanging, the ghost that's very frightening. When you just see her swinging on the tree there.
I wish Lamar was still with us, because I want to ask her, because that's not a double.
It's her.
He got her up there on that rickety ladder, standing on that platform, and I thought, not enough money in the world.
Well, what happened was she had Alex Stevens, who was always the werewolf, and Madam Finley falling down. They said, Madam Finley, why don't you answer me? That's...
I was hoping you'd do that.
That's him, and they were going to put him in Lamar's outfit, and she says in here, I wanted to take a go at it, so they put me in the swinging suit, and he walked me through it, and she said I did it. She said I had a ball hanging myself take after take.
Oh my God.
She said I just wanted to make sure. Whoops. Hang on.
You took the
Angelique.
camera.
It's the ghost of Dan Curtis getting us back for.
So what happened?
That was weird. I think my little girl knocked it over with her foot.
Angelique.
She knocked it over. Sorry, guys. Sorry.
Yeah.
Hey, it's a show about Dark Shadows. We have to have bloopers.
We've got to have bloopers.
Yeah, shades rolling up and all that kind of stuff.
She said I was just mainly concerned about making sure that I got my neck, over to the side, and how to dangle my feet to make it look like I was being strangled. They did shots, I guess, of that, where she wanted to, making sure the feet looked like they were going the way feet do go when you get hanged.
Unfortunately, when we do the tours in July,
yeah,
we will not be able to show you the hanging tree.
That beautiful tree that used to be facing the gallery came down in a storm last year. So Angelique's hanging tree is no more.
That's kind of poignant in a way.
Right?
Backing up to Miss Parker's
Bingo.
passing,
Yeah.
For a while, you could get, when it did actually fall, they were, I think for a donation, I think they were selling pieces of the tree. I'm not sure whether they are or not anymore. But they were back after it originally fell. You could own a piece of Angelique's hanging tree. So reach out to Lyndhurst, guys. Yeah. We'll ask them too. We should reach out to the team there and see if we can still get some of those, because I like it as a souvenir. But yeah, she got up on the ladder and she did it.
We do know that they have some Night of Dark Shadows merchandise that's debuting, because they gave us a couple of them.
Yes, there's going to be some stuff, and I know there's going to be a prop from one of the films. I'm not sure if it's House of Dark Shadows or Night of Dark Shadows, but it's something that was used in the film that's going to be on display. So that's going to be there.
A bit of Reverend Strack's nasty hair. You can come touch the greaves. So the there was something that I'd seen in the movie too. The second time that I watched it, that I didn't notice in the it was a reference to something. Carlotta. So Carlotta Drake as a child was sort of taken under Angelique's wing, but they're not related, right? There was no connection, or do they just? I don't think they explain it, but she's just a kid. Her mother was the maid of the house, and the kid took a shine to Angelique
That's what I get.
and Angelique. Okay, so my problem here is this: Carlotta committing suicide. Okay, it's a dark moment in time, so the jig is up, blah blah blah. But what I don't like is that Angelique was beckoning her to her doom because, again, one tone, and I don't think the series definitely provided a lot of proof. At one point, Angelique even tells Barnabas in 1897, "I know who David is. I care about David too."
Right.
That's not my Angelique
Bingo.
summoning somebody that she cared for, like, or I don't think she would have. She was rough, and she was particularly rough with Ben, but she was not heartless. And I think when you make her that kind of backstabbing villain who summons somebody I think that was a mistake, a bad choice for the character. And I do would like to say that this movie was way less bloody than, for some reason, I guess it was a vampire story, but there's one bit of blood when he cuts Quentin, and I thought, what the? That was rude to do to John. You could have told him we were planning less blood. You
Oh my
know,
God. Yes. Yes. This is my point. It's like you went ahead and did a film that was not nearly as bloody. That's all you had to promise the man. And
you
it goes
listened
with the.
to him. You listened, you took his advice, but you didn't. And tell him about the ratings jump as a result of the blood in House of Dark Shadows. That
Well,
Mr.
yeah.
Cribb was
Forget
like,
forget the
not a good
jump
idea.
off the
Yeah.
cliff.
Yeah. And that was George DiCenzo who said we saw there was a little bit because mommy and daddy went to the movies and said, this is what you're watching at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Not no more.
See? So, I mean, they took his advice. They didn't bother to tell him they were taking his advice, clearly, but what a mistake. I was watching that time. I was like, "Ooh, that's a slap in the mug."
The,
What's
the
so
only other
interesting. Go ahead,
the
John.
only other bloody scene is when he pummels him with the horse, Reverend Strack. But that's
The shot, the when Claire shoots Gerard.
But
no,
even
that's
that's not horrible. It's just a
yeah.
little bit of blood. It's down his face, but he's been shot. It's not like,
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
understanding the horse Trask thing because Strack
Strack.
thing because contextually, like, where did that fall in on the timeline? Because you see Strack after he's still alive.
So it's after Angelique has been killed, and he's saying, "You killed her. You
You
killed her. You."
killed
He's
her.
getting revenge on Strack, which apparently they went to a place where horses died. It's in the book, and that's a stagehand with two hooves of a dead horse,
Are you kidding?
and he's actually like now Thayer's like going as they're poking him with these just the hooves, the legs of the horse.
So some guy in the
that seems so
1970s.
sexual.
All right.
That feels so sexual. What the hell's going on there?
So some guy in the 70s had on his resume, I was the guy with the two horse hooves.
They were left over from The Godfather.
Right. Good fellas. What do you say? What do they call that? My got it caught. Like, what do they call that? The paw, the hoof, the hoof.
The hoof,
They
the
call that
hoof, the hoof.
What do you call that? The paw?
the paw.
Got Thayer
God.
saying, "I'm strangely titillated by all this."
Where's my chocolate bar? It reminds me too. I couldn't help. So this is like the soul satanic panic era in the 70s and 60s where they started making all these movies about witchcraft and like Rosemary's Baby and Race with the Devil and all that. And I couldn't help watching it thinking that Strack was a little bit reminiscent of the whole situation was sexually driven too. Was Hammer made a movie when it was going downhill called Twins of Evil, And Peter Cushing played. I love it, but Peter Cushing played a witch hunter. Beautifully played, I thought, because in the end he realized, oh, I've been wrong, and it with my own nieces and all that. And I couldn't help but think, I think that the look and all of that was a little bit influenced by Twins of Evil. The harsh tone and all of that was similar to me.
And let me just say, those were some twins of evil, man. For for a 10-year-old boy, man, they helped induce puberty a few years early.
Yes, indeed. I remember that movie very well.
But I was thinking about, you bring up Hammer, and I go again. I think he missed out on the franchise. I mean, mind you, the Hammer movies are relatively violent, but they were very colorful costume pictures. And I think he could have done more of that. Again, if he had, I'm so glad you said it. It's like the second movie is more psychological thriller, almost. They just had to bring down the blood violence and say, well, it's like I was reading about Frank Langella the other day. Jonathan turned down Dracula on Broadway as Langella's replacement because somehow he got the impression that they wanted him to do a send-up. Langella refused to do a send-up, and when he got offered the movie, he said, I'll do it, but no fangs, no contact lenses, no gratuitous blood, and he never does that. It's all sensual. When he goes for Lucy, it's a kiss, and you realize what he's doing, but we don't see, the canines. We don't see any of that stuff. And if they could have just gotten on that track.
That's one of my favorite movies.
It's great.
The Langella. There's minimal blood. I mean, he scratches his chest, which is sensual. That's a very sensual scene, which is actually in the literature, but very sensual. There's no gratuitousness about the movie at all. The score is beautiful. You've got Olivier and Langella and Donald Pleasance in one, and Kate Milligan. It's tragic.
Interestingly enough, the first time he played Dracula was in stock in 1967.
Oh, how funny.
So the same year that Jonathan played Barnabas, that was his first time playing Dracula. And again, he refused. There's a wonderful story he tells where they were getting ready to do it on Broadway, and they were putting all these green footlights in. And he looked at the guy and said, "What's with all the green lights?" And they were like, "Oh, Dracula, horror, right?" And he said, "No, Dracula, romance."
Yeah. I mean, and they're very similar types. Their style is even in when they're not on camera, stage in character, they're both very poised and well spoken and elegant.
Yes.
And they're very similar actors in style, at least I think.
Yeah.
We should point out that this truly is opportunity lost because Dan had a 3-picture deal. So first, House of Dark Shadows, second, Night of Dark Shadows, third picture canceled. So it's
important to point out, though, that the film made $1.4 million.
Exactly.
It was a $900,000 budget. So it was not, as Darren says, the colossal flop that people made it out to be. And Dan, again, when he went to Aubrey and they showed him the cut version, he said, "Great, tight little thriller, just what I wanted." And he said, "But you don't understand. It's incoherent." And the response was, "With your audience, it doesn't matter."
Because they're thinking kids.
Yeah.
Which is so stupid.
And again,
well, well, go ahead. I think Tim Burton did the same thing. He could have had if he had learned from history and used Depp, and Depp could have done it. I mean, he did it beautifully, and then I think it was comedic, but he did it beautifully. If they'd taken it seriously, they could have had. I think Ms. Parker said the same thing. You guys had a franchise you didn't even know, you didn't even recognize in this. If you had done it, there's so much fertile ground. Dark Shadows is very parallel to Star Trek, and I don't mean to, not in the sci-fi sense, but in the sense that the ground is so fertile that if they treat it right and get somebody behind it, they could do so very much now. I mean, they had it. I mean, this movie's beautifully budgeted. Like you said, it's beautifully shot.
Yep.
The score is incredible.
Brilliant.
The acting was, they just missed the boat with the storyline. It was
I,
so crazy.
I just pulled it up on Box Office Mojo. So just to have some context here. So Night of Dark Shadows, $900,000 budget, did 1.4 million. House of Dark Shadows, $440,000 budget, did $3.1 million. So you can see they were thinking, "Where's the other couple of million, Buster?"
They
Well,
probably
and
lost it from the parents not letting their kids see it after the first one.
Yep.
I'll
They're
go
not seeing that.
again. I'll go you one better. And again, it's not to guys. For those of you who love it, and I know I love everybody in this movie. There's really
Hmm.
nobody in the Dark Shadows cast that I don't like. So it's not to demean anyone, but I think
Exactly.
just like the theme not being there in the beginning, I do. Oh, great question, Gary. Hang on to that. I do think that people, when they caught wind that Barnabas wasn't in it, that was another reason why the movie did not do as well as it could have. And that's to not denigrate David Selby at all. But I just think there was a contingency of fans saying, no, no Barnabas, we're not interested.
Right. Let's put Gary's question up because this is something Peter and I have talked about this offline.
We talked to her about it.
Yep. Um, so let's put this up on the screen. Gary asks, "Do you guys think any of Lamar's DS novels would make a good DS movie? If so, which one?"
All of them. All of them. And
All
I
of
said,
them.
we talked to her about this, I think, in that Mackin chat that I did with her, that you've got what is it? Four, you've got 4 seasons. You do the first one, Angelique's Descent. You do the second one, Salem Branch. You do the third one, Wolf Moon Rising, and then you've got Heiress of
Harris
Collinwood,
of
and
Collinwood, yeah.
you've got, there you go. It's just the Curtis, the Curtis daughters would have to give the green light. They'd have to work with Lamar, or rather with Katie and Jim at this point, because I'm sure they're the executors. I would bet any amount of money that they are the executors of the estate now. So, yes, absolutely yes. And the great thing is, it picks up where the show left off. So we're in 1972, and in that Mark B. Perry vein of, we're going to make it look like the Dark Shadows you love. We're going to do that. It's going to look like all of Cy Thomasoff's sets. They're going to be more sturdy and they're going to be a little bit bigger, but it's going to look like all the places you know and love because we need to get the fans in. And on that note, I meant to say this at the top of the show, but I'll say it now. Say what you want about it. People will make fun of it. I grew up watching it. I love it. I think it gets a bad rap because there was a lot of comedy infused and he wasn't very preachy. Little House on the Prairie just celebrated its 50th anniversary.
Wow.
18,000 people showed up to Simi Valley. They had to turn people away. There were conventions all over. It got worldwide. As a result, Family Friendly Productions, which owns the rights and did the original show, it has now been greenlit on Netflix. There is going to be a Little House reboot. Now, there's pandemonium because they're going, oh my God, it's my childhood. They're going to ruin it. Alison Arngrim, who played Nellie, is one of the nicest, funniest ladies you'd ever want to meet. And she's like, guys, we got to give it a chance. They're going back to the books. They're going back to the Laura Ingalls books. She said, realize we made up characters on that show that came out of Michael Landon's mind. It was his baby. He took the stories and we used some of her stuff, but then they created new stuff. So you got to give this new show. And she also went on to say, my heart breaks for the little girl that's cast as Laura, because she's ultimately going to be compared to Melissa Gilbert.
Right.
Right out the gate, this is going to be a problem. But she said, you've got to give it a chance. And her turn of phrase, a rising tide floats all boats. If it works out, they're going to, they're probably going to ask us to be on it in some capacity. She said, I'm ready and willing to play Mrs. Olsen. I'm the right age for it now. Now I can play the mother. this time. So I think it could be done with Dark Shadows. If you go with Dan didn't want a continuum. He didn't think it could work. He said you got to go back to the original stories. So I think if we did it, not to put down Mark B. Perry, because I want to see Mark B. Perry's series done.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a great idea. But go back to the original 1966, take the basic storylines and let new writers put new spins on them. We can get all those things we like, but now you're going to let these writers put new spins on the stories. But I do think it could work. I do believe a reboot could work if the right people were behind it. They're doing it with something like Little House on the Prairie. Why can't it be done with Dark Shadows?
Really, the revival worked. It was canceled for reasons beyond quality and all of that. It did work, and people did love it. And as far as Miss Parker's books, if you don't, if you have access to get them on all with her reading them, do that because these books are so well done that you when you listen to it, she has written Collinwood as is. Like you can see every step of her story. You see Collinwood, you see the pool house, you see everything and everybody. Absolutely, they could be standalone movies.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Really
It's a
quick,
shame she's not allowed to advise.
Yeah.
Janine
Harris, who was one of those kids who ran home from school to watch the original series, she saw House of Dark Shadows. And then when she found out Barnabas was not in Night of Dark Shadows, she did not go. So there we have it.
And I think that spilled over, Janine. I think, there were people saying, well, wait a minute, Barnabas isn't in it at all. If it had been a Barnabas Quentin movie, but again, I think he was dark. In fact, Johnny Karlen did say it, and it was, I think it made people uncomfortable. It was on a dais, and David Selby was there, and when the question was asked, Johnny Karlen said, I think because we didn't have Barnabas. I think it was because we didn't have Barnabas. I think that's why it didn't work. And he wasn't trying to demean David. It just...
so it's like Fright Night, right? What did Tom Holland say? Charlie is the heart of the movie, but Peter is the engine. Or Charlie he made something like Charlie's as important as Peter Vincent, but Peter Vincent is the heart of this film.
Yeah,
you have to be able to recognize that, and it seems like they're just getting worse. And listen to your fans, go with what works. Barnabas worked every time. The triune, Angelique, Barnabas, and Quentin were a good formula to stick with. So stick with it.
Also, some very uncomfortable moments in this movie. I mean, let's face it, he's about to rape Tracy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Does he choke her, too?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, he chokes her. And it's like at one moment you think he's out of it, and then I guess Angelique takes over again. And it's really disturbing. Yeah, you're going out of, at least at that time, the realm of Dark Shadows. I would fully suspect that if there was a reboot of the original series, even with it being set in 1966, which it should be, costume piece within a costume piece.
It has to be because...
you can't do these things with technology.
Ancestry.com. Who the fuck is Barnabas Collins? There's no Barnabas Collins in England.
No, you got to go. Yeah, no, you...
They just found Jack the Ripper. They just figured out who Jack the Ripper was.
Not
like
That's right.
Month ago.
That's right.
That Polish immigrant? I know. Crazy.
That whole human saliva bit, you have to be able to go back to that because that's creepy. But that's as far as they could get with it, that's enough. Nope, got to be back in time.
Yeah, if you want
to... So for those of you who don't know, they have solved the Jack the Ripper case definitively because one of the victims, whose name escapes me at the moment, there was at the scene, semen was found on a scarf. They were able to test the semen, put it through a DNA database, find out one of the ancestors, trace it back to this Polish immigrant who was in London at the time. Isn't that
I'm
crazy?
sorry.
Semen on a scarf.
100-year-old milk.
I'm sorry. I just thought of Dorothy's Bornak saying, Blanche, I could get herpes listening to this story.
Oh my god.
For the last time, Rose, you cannot get pregnant sitting on a mall toilet.
Oh my God.
100-year-old semen. I mean, you know, the proof of the pudding is in the eating.
You,
Keep it in your head.
oh, and Michael, you circle back to an important point that
Oh god.
it actually they got the demographic they wanted. Dan Curtis said that with the 91 series. It was Warren Littlefield. He didn't want the show, and that's why the show was axed. So they put all the blame on the Gulf War and that, but it was Warren Littlefield did not want it, and they put it in a time slot that it could not survive. I'll maintain it should have been Sunday nights right after Murder, She Wrote. Different network, but if you had Cabot Cove, Maine, and then you would have had Collinsport, Maine right after it.
Oh yeah.
It would have been much better than Friday night. That was a horrible, disastrous thing to do. It was.
Well, we were all out. I mean,
and to what you said, they did that to Star Trek. That's what canceled Star Trek in the '60s. They moved it to Friday night, and nobody's home. Nobody cares. You know.
Yeah.
They're not that into it. And to what you said about being uncomfortable, about him almost raping Tracy.
Yeah.
It was extremely uncomfortable after going through all that. That Gerard starts to try and rape her in the car. It was like, whoa, that's not cool. You know, that's very tense.
And I wasn't sure where that even came from.
Well, I mean, Kate Jackson says in the book, in the Dark Shadows movie book, that Dan actually let them experiment more in this, that they didn't necessarily have to stick to the script. Which actors do like when a director will give you that kind of, freedom. Say, okay, you want to try this? Let's try it. So they did do that. Fun things. Nancy Barrett, mentioned Johnny and I didn't have much to do, so we sat around. We were not as involved as we were in the first film, and she stayed in the costumers trailer, and he taught her how to make grilled cheese sandwiches with an iron.
Oh, how funny!
She said, "I gained a lot of weight. You take the bread, you put it in tin foil, you put the iron on top of the sandwich, you press it down, and you got a grilled cheese." So she said, "I just ate nothing but grilled cheese sandwiches while I was making Night of Dark Shadows."
Oh, that's hysterical.
That's really sweet. That's a lovely little story. And what a wasted opportunity, because they're great actors. They could have used them in so much more. So much more. Well, Peter Cushing, there's a scene in Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, which is the later Hammer. And they had written a rape. He was to rape Veronica Carlson, who was somebody he worked with quite regularly. Hammer was like Dark Shadows. It was almost like a rep company. And it was very graphic, and Cushing said, I'm not doing this. You don't need all this. Yeah. I'll throw her onto the bed, and I'll act like I'm going to rip her top or what, but that's as far as I go. You find more and more and more that if it's not, people don't like unconsensual sex in film, particularly a horror. Like, it's not what you're looking for in a horror film. So it's uncomfortable, and you've got enough going on,
The only time it works is for those of you out there. One of my and it's, you either love it or you hate it. One of my favorite Dracula movies is Andy Warhol's Dracula, or Blood for Dracula, and the hero in that movie is they've got a sexy Van Helsing. It's Joe D'Alessandro as the humpy handyman on the estate, and in the end, he is being heroic because Dracula needs virgin blood, so he's got to take the youngest daughter's virginity in order to save her from being, gobbled up by Udu care. So it's a bizarre. What would you call that? It's kind of a bizarre twist there. She's not really of age, and this shouldn't be going on, but in the end, becoming
Took one
undead
for the
or,
There you go.
being
yeah.
I stooped her, but I saved her.
I stooped her, but I saved her. Exactly.
We got to
You
meet
got to
Joe
see
D'Alessandro.
Nosferatu.
Yes,
Oh,
I do want
really?
to. Yes, I do want to see Nosferatu. Yes, there was another one. I got to meet Joe, and he signed my Japanese Blood for Dracula movie program. And I said, Joe,
I have a penchant for short Italian men who are muscular.
you had.
And then to see Peter and Joe together, I was like, he's shorter than Peter. How is that possible?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But man, the guy still has a 28-inch waist.
Yeah.
But I said.
Our height.
And a fine gagoots.
And a fine good goods. But I told him, I said, Joe, you had several scenes in that movie that helped induce puberty early. We'll leave it there.
I thank you.
I thank you.
Oh,
I think it's, did we miss? I want to make sure we get the comments here because I feel like we're not.
There's discussions going on in the background. Yes, Bob Pierce, that is true. We've talked to many of the actors who were already in discussions to come and be part of the 91 series, had it been picked up.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they were going to bring.
And if Bob Pierce, if you haven't seen our episode, a couple of episodes ago, we actually covered the 91 series over 3 episodes.
Over 3 episodes, yeah. So check that
about
out.
This in length.
Yeah, because they all wanted to be on it. Lara wanted to be on it. Catherine wanted to be on it. And that was the big thing with Curtis, where he said, I'd love to use you guys, but I'd have to write new stories for you. And from Lara's perspective, the writing was the harder part. It was easier for him to go back and say, let's take what we have. And again, he said, I was forced to put a new spin on it, which is what my suggestion is, that if they do a reboot of the original storyline, take the core, but you can put new spins on some of that stuff or even come up with some really brand new stuff as well.
Nick Caputo asks, what were Selby's thoughts on the movie? I suspect he commented on it in various interviews, although I'm not recalling anything offhand.
Do you know it's interesting, Nick? I offhand, I don't know. I think they were all upset about the cuts. I mean, remember, for a lot of them, this was their first major motion picture. For David, for Kate, it wasn't. I don't believe it was Johnny's, because I think Johnny had already filmed Daughters of Darkness, which I love. If you've never seen Johnny Carlin in Daughters of Darkness,
it's Nancy's debut too.
It's House of Dark Shadows.
Oh, House of Dark Shadows.
Yeah.
Of course, stupid me.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember, did he film Hodge before Daughters of Darkness? I think a lot of people in that second film, it was their foray into the world of major motion pictures. So
there's also discussion going on in the groups about how important Bob Colbert's music is.
You can Robert Cobert, that music is another character, both in the show as well as in the films.
That goes back to what you were saying about why would you take that beginning out?
Yes.
The opening score is, and I mean, people that don't like Dark Shadows usually can pinpoint the score. Quentin's song.
Yep.
Angelique's song. Where was that? That wasn't in there, was it? Angelique's theme from Parallel Time? That should have been in there.
No, it's not.
No.
It's
Shadows of the Night. There's several, redos of Shadows of the Night.
And that kitschy kind of thing.
Darren Gross talks about this. Bob Colbert never saw a single image from the film. He did all of the composition in a vacuum using the shooting script. So he did 5 or 6 versions of a stinger. He did the change to the Quentin's theme with a couple of different endings to that, with a couple of different intros. But yeah, all done in a vacuum.
This is from the book, guys, and it says, the movie finished production on May 7th, 1971.
This is David speaking?
This is Darren Gross speaking.
Okay.
The movie finished production on May 7th, 1971, and was then edited and scored in New York. Curtis again employed Robert Cobert to write the music score, this time allowing him to create some original cues. The melodies were not written to match specific scenes, but were designed to evoke a certain mood. They were recorded in one day with an orchestra of only 5 to 6 musicians.
Oh,
For the
wow.
main title, Colbert reused the somber but lovely Joanna's theme from the TV series, utilizing a new version with a harmonica. The popular Quentin's theme was originally written for The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, was also featured in a variety of styles. So that's about the music there. While shooting the
The
opening of the
harmonica part.
film, rain began to fall as Quentin and Tracy arrive at Collinwood in a convertible. David Selby stopped the car to put up the rooftop, and the remainder of the scene was filmed as if the rain had been planned, it was something I was going back to when I was watching it last
Oh,
night.
interesting.
I think a lot of the rain in Night of Dark Shadows was not planned, whereas in House of Dark Shadows, Carolyn's funeral, that's the Terrytown Fire Department that's pumping in the rain for
Because
that scene.
Angelique's funeral is pouring.
Yeah, and I believe that was real rain. I don't think that was being pumped in by the fire department.
And everyone should note that's an empty casket because she's actually shackled down in the catacombs with Charles.
Right. Right. He gets thrown. Right. He gets thrown into the into that. What's that great Blackula line? Nefarious tomb. It's that great
Really?
line.
So they were written into a certain place, and they didn't, they were, and they just did a fake funeral then?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, they should have alluded to that. That would have been kind of groovy to see. You know,
Again, you really have
it's a,
to, and I didn't have a chance to do it, but you've got to read the shooting script because there's so much in there of what's missing, and that could be in this restored version. Again, I'm not hating on the movie. I'm just kind of indifferent to it, and I want to like it, and maybe I will after I see a restored, hopefully restored version of it. I know the people that have worked on this, Darren and Ansel, this is their baby, and so many people want it. And since I know I have friends that want it, I want to see it come because again, it's all part of the Dark Shadows legacy. So
well, and I think that's the thing here. So it's not that you dislike the movie as much as there are characters in this movie that you adore. And it's hard when you watch something that when they're not the titular character, but they are, and you see so little of them. Nobody in this movie is really given a moment to really exercise any of them, other than maybe Kate Jackson. She does a lot of, the emotional stuff, and she's drowned and all of that. But you want to see these characters, and you just really don't. Like Angelique's kind of like Christopher Lee at some points, just hissing in the corner. It's not you're not getting from them what you'd hoped for. It's not a hatred; it's just kind of a disappointment for me. Although it is a good witch movie, if you stop thinking of it as Dark Shadows and expecting Angelique, it is a creepy witch movie with lots of great ghostly shots and stuff like that.
it's funny that you say because I also wonder with this, she's accused of witchcraft, but I almost kind of feel like was she really a witch while she was alive, or is this just her
A ghost.
spirit coming back
Yeah,
and now she's gonna wreak havoc on the family and have her revenge.
I think you're right. Because there's not spell one. Every bit of damage that she does is ghostly.
Yeah,
If she were a witch, she probably wouldn't have needed Grayson to help her or any of the. And it says that a fog appeared in the car when they died. He'd seen a white fog. Well, that's very spectral. That's not necessarily. So it's a vengeful ghost. It's so many of those New England stories. She was hung as a witch, and now her ghost haunts this place forever. That kind of thing. It's very
Doesn't
much
she?
so.
The one thing she says to Charles, though, is, I want you to bring her to life.
bring the portrait to life.
Bring the
Portrait to
portrait to
life.
life.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
that's kind of witchy.
yeah. Well,
Sometimes I think that's just because it's Quentin and you have to attach. They were desperately trying to attach
Got it.
some real dark shadows in there. I don't know. I could be wrong.
yeah, or that again the portrait was going to be of Laura rather than
When
Tracy.
they hang her, or I know when they grab her, she claws at one of them and says, "Don't touch me. I'll go with you, but don't put your hands on me." And then they hang her. But she doesn't say anything like the devil would give you blood to drink like they did at the actual. Is there nothing like that, right? There's no actual curse pronounced.
No, there is no curse pronounced, and it does remind me again of that show where it was. Think of what Night of Dark Shadows would do for your career. Angelique says, "Don't touch me. I'll go with you, but don't touch my lines. I have so few of them in this movie as it is."
Get away from that script, I'll kill you.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much about it, and you think about you can't help but thinking about the movie that could have been had Jonathan not been treated the way he was treated. Again, the franchise, what they could have done with David and Jonathan together. I would have loved to have seen a Phoenix movie. I would have liked the third movie to have been. It couldn't have been David Hennessy. He would have been too old. They would have needed a new actor. But they could have done the Phoenix storyline as its own movie. I think that would have been great.
I was delighted to see her in the movie. I was really happy to see. I thought, oh, forgot Diana Malay is in this. Oh, that's great. I wish she'd have more, but I really enjoyed seeing her in it.
And I'd forgotten that she was a replacement.
So beautiful.
Oh yeah, Diana was a beautiful lady. She was very much an anti-Mame character.
Another one you see how beautiful she is in this movie more than you did in the show. Like, I don't know what it is about the camera quality, but they're beautiful in the series, but so much, it jumps out so much more in these movies.
It's different shades because Dan said the past and the present can't look the same. So they used a different color process, or the lighting. It was everything combined, so that they wanted it to have more of a pastel look, I think. Again, it's all in here, but they wanted those scenes in the past to have a very different hue to them than what you're seeing in the present day.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they were all beautiful women. You've got Kate and who's simply shouldn't even need makeup, and Lamar, who said they wanted me to have this ghostly quality, and on camera it looks great, but she said I was in like chalk geisha makeup that they put sparklies under, so like glitter was on her face in those ghostly moments. She said on camera it looks beautiful, but if you saw me up close in person, I mean, it was almost like Baby Jane. They had her in this very geisha makeup with all these sparkles on her face.
Baby Jane, I'll be thinking of that. There was another question I had for you about the movie. But
and any questions we have from anybody watching? Any questions from anybody watching?
Something about Grayson.
Why did Diana not work anymore after DS? Does anyone know?
I think it was by choice. She when she was called in for Dark Shadows, Gary, she said to them, "I will not audition for you." Because she had done, something like 85 or 90 guest starring roles on television. She had been working since she was a kid. She was also like Miss Pickle of 1955.
Who was joked Mr. about Pickle? Anyway.
So she said, "Listen, I'm not auditioning for you." She was very, and then when she read the Phoenix monologue, she said, "Oh my God, I have to read this for you. I have to read this." So she read the monologue. And it was on that basis alone that, she did it. And he said, "Good, you're hired." That was Bob Costello. He said, "Good, you're hired." And she said, "Well, of course I am, because I am a Phoenix. If you didn't know already, I am a Phoenix." Diana was very eccentric.
Eccentric and very, very spiritual. She really embraced in the 70s a lot of white magic, occult, healing. Craig Hamrick, who we talked about earlier, who was a very, very close friend of ours,
and very, very close with Diana,
died of a debilitating set of cancer. that settled in his brain and then moved to his lungs. And he died before his
40th
40th
birthday.
birthday.
Yeah, a few weeks before.
And she took him on a healing retreat to South America. But she was very, very big on that. My godmother was Florida Freebus, who was Dobie Gillis's mother on Dobie Gillis, and she was Dobie's girlfriend. We used to joke that she was the oldest living ingenue because she looked the same into her 40s. But I think she left acting because she was really enamored with and passionate about the occult and white magic.
Well, she had her son. In fact,
Her
they had
son.
to speed up the Phoenix storyline. It was going to go a little longer, but she was getting more pregnant, and so they had to bring it to an end when they did. And she would only play Lara Collins. I think they really had to probably get it on it's Laura, but it's a different Laura. But she said, "If I'll come back to the show," she was in talks with them. It's another ghost. She was in talks with them to come back before the cancellation happened, and she said, "I'll do it, but I will only play Lara Collins." She was supposed to be in Jameson Selby's Return to Collinwood, and apparently dropped out when she found out she would not be playing Lara Collins. She would only play Lara Collins.
Can I just tell you two quick things?
Sure. Please, go for it.
With the ghost thing and the other stuff going on over there, I hear it. Now, I'm the only one in this house. My wife is dog sitting with my son, and the other son's in Arizona. I turned off the television, and after a little bit, I hear it in the background. It's on again.
Wow.
Yeah, in my room, I don't know. And the other thing was, I wanted to ask you about a question about Jeremiah and
And it's an
Laura.
episode of Dobie Gillis on TV. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
There's a scene in 1795 when it's the episode where Millicent is introduced, and Joshua is pushing hard on Jeremiah for him to forge something with Millicent. And anyway, he's talking with, I believe, Victoria, and he says something about, I don't remember the question or even how it was framed, but he alludes to the fact that there might have been somebody else in his life. I wonder if they'd actually heard that and brought it back for Laura to be his wife initially, or because I was like, oh, I don't think I've ever caught that before, that Jeremiah might have been. It was like a hint that he may have been married or thinking of marriage, and I can't remember what it was about my happiness being something again, or it was like again, like something went wrong before. But then it goes on, and Jeremiah comes in and starts hammering about. Have you noticed that ever?
It's funny. I'm glad you're bringing this up because we've been talking about, again, we have a long list of topics we want to cover on the show, and having just covered 1991, we want to do a series of a podcast where we'll cover 1795.
1895.
Yeah, because it's about 80 episodes of change, so we're probably going to have to binge watch about 20 at a time over 4 nights.
Fans unite.
And we'll get through it that way. But yeah, that's going to be upcoming, guys. We're going to definitely cover the 1795 storyline. I do not remember Jeremiah saying that, but it's been about 2 years since I've watched the series all the way through. So now I've got to go back and catch that because I'd love to know what that was about.
I had been, when I get pissed off at somebody, I start watching early Barnabas to fuel as if an Italian needs his fire fueled. But anyway, I had gone through all that, and I'd gone to, the color, and then like you were talking about, I always go back to those two, the early colored episodes when, so I've been jumping around from that, and that's how I ended up in her, how the old house went peachy. It has a lovely peach color to it. I was like, that's an odd choice.
And isn't it interesting? I think it's really interesting. I said to John the other night how
we have a fan, Barbara
Ooh.
Baines, and she said it's interesting that you guys all have the same hairstyle.
Oh, well, you can't. You can't.
See my Snapchat.
Look, yeah. It's
It's
the high and tight on the sides.
Except mine's,
Peter's got a mohawk.
I got the mohawk. I got the mohawk going on. So
sorry about that.
These two don't.
I don't have any hair.
Oh,
Well, I
no, no,
do, but
no.
Try,
I'm like Ed O'Neill.
we're getting to the point there where we go, oh, I see. Like there's a little patch where there used to be some hair
Something there.
there. Something was there once upon a time. But thank you for noticing that, Barbara. Uh, oh, if we ever do a gossip show, well, you know, we'll have to think about that. We try to be reverent, because there's
Gary has a Diana Malay story if we ever do a gossip show. So.
we try to be
You
we
have no
try to be
idea how
reverent.
hard we try.
You have right, we do. We try our best.
We're on our best
Right,
behavior.
somebody.
I mean, in the final analysis, I sincerely hope that the restoration does go through.
Yeah.
Again, here I want Judy's A Star Is Born restored, and it's up to Warner Brothers. And here's something interesting. Look,
I do not share this hope, but keep going.
just being honest. He's just being honest, guys. He's just being
He
honest.
likened it undue torture.
Here, we just got a new Salem's Lot, and we got gypped. We got gypped because it was a 3-hour movie, and the guy was forced to cut it down to this 90-minute film. Almost the same kind of thing. Now, this is under Warner Brothers. So here, like, fans are saying, how can we petition to get that 3-hour cut? And that's a new movie. I mean, it would not be that hard for them to slap that on a DVD. But there still hasn't even...
money.
And make a little money. So...
Come on, people.
I do know there was a woman who worked on, it's a Paramount, not Warner Brothers, but she did some restoration on A White Christmas this past year. She found things that like were better cuts, better sound, better this, better that, and they showed it in the movie theaters. She said, now if you want it on a disc, they don't listen to me. She said, I'm a hired hand. My opinion doesn't mean anything. You all have to write to them individually, do a Facebook campaign.
Oh, wow.
And if you do that, they'll say, well, wait a minute, there's money to be made here. We're going to put that on a disc. So that's my advice is for those of you who want this movie restored, start writing individually, do a Facebook campaign so that this can finally come to fruition. Because, again, there are people that want it. It is part of the Dark Shadows legacy. And it should be out there. It should be. It does
work. I mean, Betty White credited her comeback to Facebook, to social media. It does. They do listen. They are watching.
Yeah.
So
do it. Do it. Let them know. Let them know at Warner Brothers that you want the fully restored Night of Dark. Because I think that's virtually almost done. I think there's only one thing left to do. And I believe, if I have this wrong, forgive me, it's the actor that has been hired to do Grayson's dubbing. They've been retained, but I don't think, and it's only a few lines, I believe. It's not a lot. But it's just these few lines of Grayson dialogue that has to be restored. And I think don't quote me on this, that once that's done, they'll basically be in the clear. They just got to green light it.
God. So near and yet so far. The green hills of earth.
And it might be a male actor actually doing the role. That's not gossip.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it's a male actor or if because I think there were. In fact, I was given sides years ago when it first came to fruition. I was sent sides to submit a tape. So, nothing ever came of it, but I don't even think I have those sides anymore. They're on an old hard drive, but that was interesting. Yeah. So because Sam Hall, when he was asked who should do Grayson's voice, and his response apparently was, well, I think it should be a man.
He's a good sport.
I mean, in an era, what's the problem?
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely. I think go with what works.
Yeah.
I think Julie Bowen or Roz, Perry, I can't her last name. I always struggle with Gelplin, who played Roz on Frasier.
Oh, I love her.
Sure.
Perry Gelpin.
Very deep. Yeah, she's got a
And
beautiful
my
voice.
be all end all is Judy Davis. She's the one I would like to
Oh,
see play her
Julia.
if this Mark B. Perry thing comes to fruition. I would like to see again. I want Barney and Julia to be remnants of what we know.
We need to make that one of our next episodes coming up. Our shadow casting, dream casting episode,
Sure,
And
sure,
retro.
and retro casting.
and retro
You know, I
casting.
have a question about Barnabas. How the hell old was he supposed to be when he was cursed? Because I know Jonathan was older, but like I was thinking if they were, and Ben Cross indeed was in his 30s at least.
Older.
Are they going to do it? Try to do it a young man, or is he? Yeah, I mean Barnabas. It always eluded me because I know
So he was a
Frid was
confirmed bachelor until he was 40. I mean, right?
right,
Well,
right, like
here we go. So I was told as a youngin by the elders that Barnabas was supposed to be about 35 when he died. Now you're going
okay.
back
That
into the past when people did look older as the centuries have gone on, people have gotten younger looking.
But 35 doesn't make
right.
sense because the life expectancy was 50. So he was going to get married at
But look
35.
look at Ben Stokes when you do the math, and Ben is still a lot like Ben is supposed to be about 41 in 1795. So then how old is he in 1840? Do the math.
Right, I get what you're saying.
It just depended on, and remember, this was a man who did hard manual labor.
And we all know what Dan Curtis would have said anyway. Nobody cares.
No, but Jonathan and Ben were about, because Jonathan was 42 and I think Ben was 44.
And I don't think they look. Jonathan looked bad. I'm just like I'm wondering if if they were to move forward, would they try to get a younger actor to play, which I think would be a mistake because you'd have to have a very good stage trained actor to play Barnabas. But if that's the case, then are they going to make Julia older, or are they going to be more? Because Jonathan and Grayson were good contemporary. Would they make Julia older than him? There's a lot of. I was just wondering. You think crazy things, when you're a
But
nerd.
but listen to what Peter just said.
We're
So
all nerds.
if Langella played Dracula in 1967, they were looking at New York actors. They looked at Burt Convy for Christ's sake. Did Langella come across the desk?
I don't know.
Right. Oh God, that would
I
have
He
don't
been
would
know
have been
how,
brilliant.
I don't know how established Langello, although they did like theater, he did like theater actors. My take on it is that with this, and this went over RJ's head, God love her, but I'm like, think about 1995 flash forward. Now with Barnabas, it makes sense because he's a vampire.
right.
If you're really going to go into 20 years into the future and we've aged Carolyn, there should have been a moment when they cross over where Barnabas turns around and Julia should look 20 years older.
Right. Oh, where it caught up, where
Yeah.
it catches up. Yeah, I agree. That would have been cool. Well, for God's sake, they died. They were graying his hair for some strange reason for a while. A vampire with gray hair was an interesting look, and they did it in such a way you're like, I can't tell if that's the lighting or, oh no, they're graying his hair. It's a little off.
With the Levi. So I think that's it. I think that we could have, if they do this with the sequel show, Barnabas could still look like maybe he's in his 50s now. And again, if you go with an actress like Judy Davis, no ageism here, guys, that she would have aged a little bit. And at some point, Charles Delaware Tate kind of thing going on here. Now they've been frozen where they're at. Again, logic, you've got to put logic out the window when it comes to Dark Shadows, because God knows the writers and Dan Curtis always threw logic out the window.
I just hope if they do, they include fun little lines like when after treating a vampire for years, there's a werewolf in town, and you say to the vampire, I don't know, I can't believe in this werewolf thing. And the vampire then says, oh, I don't know, there is a precedent for this in mythology or whatever. Julie, I'm like, says the vampire. The woman who treated him.
In the final analysis, again, I think for myself, Night of Dark Shadows was a missed opportunity. You had a great cast. I think the pressure was on They came up with an amalgam of Gothic stories, and somehow it should work, but it doesn't. And we'll never know unless we get that fully restored cut. Does it work? Does it not work? Maybe John will be proved wrong. I would love to be able to sit back and go, now I love the movie. Now I know what they were getting at. But we won't know. So let's all reach out to, and again, Darren Gross deserves all the credit and kudos in the world for knowing where to look. And I know Ansel Faraj has been instrumental in helping him move it along. So kudos to Ansel as well. And this is their baby, and hopefully it will come to fruition. We want to thank you guys for tuning in tonight. Remember, the Dark Shad-Bros will be at the Dark Shadows event on July 19th and 20th. Right now, our walking tours are almost sold out. I think there's one that is not sold out.
The both tours on Saturday are sold out. The 12 o'clock on Sundays, 12:30 on Sunday sold out. There are 20 tickets left for the 3:30 tour on Sunday.
There are also waiting lists. Visit Catherine Lee Scott's pages. Catherine L. Scott is where she usually posts from. There are waiting lists in case an opening comes up, so you can get on a walking tour, so you can be a part of what she's doing with Marie and Sharon, and so that you could possibly be a part of the cocktails and nibbles at Collinwood towards the evening. So check that out, and we will be back within a week with a new topic. So thank you, Michael Panzerato. Thank you, my dear, and keep staying in the shadows, guys. And good night, Angelique, wherever you are, and Carla Drake.
Write those letters for Miss Parker's memory too. Maybe they'll be a nice little gift from her.
Oh, let me say this. As Eleanor Higgins once said when she looked up at the Tower of Collinwood, Carlotta, don't jump. We won't make you do the windows.
We should